Lots of different things to talk about today, so we'll jump in. First, we were working on this as recent as yesterday afternoon, and we have notified the Escambia County School District in our interest in acquiring the Gibson School at 710 North C Street. That's obviously going to take CRA action for it to be funded, as well as school board action. So we're not presumptive of anything, but as you guys know, there's more than a century of history in that building. In the education community, many folks who live in this community that have fond memories of the John A. Gibson School, and of course it's named after someone who has had as big an impact in education of African American students and advocating for African American teachers in the city and the county over decades of time, again in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I think the school started in the 20s. It was actually just identified back then, in segregation was just identified with a number, that the school was number 103. And so, of course, since it was closed by the school district, or as a school, I believe 1972, 74, somewhere in that area, it's been the home of Community Action and the Head Start group, and they have, as you guys have reported, have since moved. Again, a lot of history that means a lot to a lot of people in this community, and so we've expressed our interest in it. And with not necessarily an exact plan moving forward. There's a lot to work through, but the primary focus is on trying to conserve and preserve a building that means a lot to a lot of people here. We don't know if it were to go to the private market. We don't know what could happen to it, whether it be that it would be demolished or something like that. Now, again, lots of work to do. This is I'm just letting you know that we are interested in it, and they have received that. But if this were to continue to proceed, it would still require a structural assessment, some other things like that, because we know that there was a lot of damage from Hurricane Sally, and we don't know to what extent. But we wanted to make sure that a building with this kind of history in our community had a fair shot to be able to be preserved if it could be. And so there's a chance that we, with facts, that ends up being difficult for the city as well. So more to come, lot happening, but we have, again, notified them of our interest, and our intent is to get something to the CRA board to authorize us to negotiate. And then from there, the process would start with school board approval, those kinds of things. So excited to see where that goes. Baptist Hospital funding. We're going to get a one-sheeter. If you don't have it already, we'll get it out to you. I wanted to give some more clarity around what we're looking at in terms of a funding stack to try to get this project done. So again, you've heard me mention, but I know we've talked about it over many different meetings, but just so you guys understand the numbers that I'm going off of. Understand, these are preliminary. This has not been RFP'd. This is with the information that Baptist has, that, and yes, our engineers have seen it. But really no one at this point is going to sign their name to these exact numbers. I think this is just the best numbers we have in terms of what we estimate the costs will be. So the demolition and abatement of the main hospital and towers, we are assuming at this point, is a $14 million lift. The ancillary buildings that would be part of the donation that would be coming to the city if we were to take the property is about $2.4 million. So it shows you at about that $16.5 million we're looking at, the significant portion of it is focused on the main hospital and towers. Now, if we were to get into a scenario where we were to acquire the property and we analyzed that portions of the building could be saved or reused, obviously that would positively impact or lower that potential cost. But as I said, I'm not bringing these to you as definitive. I'm bringing these to you about what we're working off of, so when we're trying to get this fully funded, these are the numbers that we're looking at. And this is how I'm planning to get this funded, and again, in a single year. And that has been my intent with our state delegation, with our county, is to try. There's a lot of work ahead. If we snapped our fingers today and had $16.5 million, there's many years of work ahead for demolition, abatement, site preparation, environmental issues, and then to get this to turn into much needed housing. So that's why I really haven't been interested in a 2 or 3 or 4 year funding strategy. I've been interested in a 1 year funding strategy, and I'm very thankful for Senator Broxson and others that have been supportive of that. So what you see in front of you is the City of Pensacola has a $1 million CRA ask that will be coming to CRA. The way I look at that is whether it be through CRA, TIF. We also already have $500,000 earmarked, if you remember from the previous conversation with Baptist Hospital, about $500,000 towards Cooprian Park if there were to be 500 units. Obviously, we would be moving those dollars now. The strategy has changed drastically since that conversation, that we would move those $500,000 into this $1 million. So that's $1 million that we would pledge towards this project. That's not something we would be writing a check for at this exact moment. It would just be a matter of earmarking those dollars for this funding. You see a TBD at City of Pensacola for HUD CDBG. You guys have reported that we were the first money that's actually confirmed and committed at this point is the $5 million that the city applied for and was awarded for HUD CDBG commercial revitalization. You may recall I've mentioned to you guys that there's an asterisk with that $5 million in that the dollars have to be used on what will become 100% commercial property. So I've been very hesitant to commit any of that $5 million towards the stack of the main hospital and towers because that's in the heart of this development, and I think that would really throw a wrinkle into any potential master development if you were to take the heart of it and then require that property only be 100% commercial. And when I say 100% commercial, we have vetted this out with Florida Commerce and others. That does not include first floor retail and then houses above it. I've gotten that question a lot. We're talking about a grocery store, a 100% commercial. So we do have that $5 million, but that's not $5 million that you could just address the main hospital and towers with. So the way I've looked at it is, you see the $2.4 million of ancillary buildings and abatement. There is a strategy that, in my mind, where we could go on the south side of Merino Street with some of those ancillary buildings and use at least half of that money or so to abate and demolish those if needed, where that could become not in the heart of the development, but on the edges of the development where commercial would normally go, that we could potentially expend those funds. So you see, that's why I'm not really including it in the stack that's in front of you right now, not because we aren't going to use it, but just because there's a couple of wrinkles. Escambia County, I have approached and had some good productive conversations with Commissioner May and others about this, that I know that they'll be bringing forward a similar pledge that we're talking about for $2 million, and certainly we'll hope that they'll support that. And that, our $3 million is really what I mentioned to you guys already, that's going to be tied to a community benefits agreement. It means that for those $3 million to take hold with a master developer, whenever that comes, they'll have to meet some certain standards, including that the housing be first offered to the people in the surrounding neighborhood that qualify. Several different bullets that community benefits agreements have. That we don't have a final one, but that's something that the city and county will work through once we have the commitment from the CRA. Once we have the commitment from the county, we will hash that out collectively to make sure that we're doing what we can to protect the neighborhood, preserve the neighborhood, and have good harmony between a transformational project and the existing neighborhood. I'm asking Baptist Hospital to pledge $3 million, and that's not including the PACEs. They are aware of that, if there are other funding sources that come about, we continue to stay active and looking for federal, state grants. Again, we've been lucky to be awarded one already. Then we can have another conversation about city, county, and Baptist Hospital. But to make this work, in my opinion, the city and county putting up $3 million, I believe Baptist has an obligation to put up some financial responsibility with an potential $18 million demo as well. So they are aware of that. PACEs, you see, $2.9 million. That comes with the asterisk that is the value of the price that they had agreed to with Baptist to purchase the acreage way back when. But it's contingent upon them winning the tax credit projects. They have not done that the last 2 years. They're very competitive. We feel really optimistic about some of the Hurricane Sally CDBG money coming down that we believe will actually prefer unfunded tax credit projects. That gives them a very good shot. So we're going to play that out and see if that happens. I've had a great conversation with Paces about the community benefits agreement and other things to make sure that they're going to adhere to that. But if that were to close at closing, that $2.9 million would come to the city at closing, and that would be part of the stack. And then the state of Florida, there's been reports out there about who's saying what numbers. We've really got on the guidance of Senator Broxton in saying, we've never been committed to or have been presumptive of any number. And again, we continue to have conversations with the senator every day on many issues, and I'm just so thankful and grateful to have him where he is in his position. And we'll take it as it comes. So that's why that obviously is a range, because we don't know what the number is, and I don't think anybody does at this point. And so that gets you to 13.9 to 16.9 million. And then what I had mentioned earlier about the CDBG, that gives you a little more background on that. So just wanted to kind of give everyone the roadmap with some clarity. There's been some misstating of how this funding stack was going to look, and I just wanted to make sure this is how we see it today. This is an ever-evolving project. Trust me, if there's a grant out there for $3 million that we find out about tomorrow, obviously this is something that can change. But I will say the city, I am committed to having the city put in $1 million, and if approved, obviously it's pending approval, but I'm committed to that. I feel good about where the county is, and I feel it's fair to say that if the city and county put in $3 million, that Baptist should put in $3 million to make this work. So other wrinkles that could happen is obviously when we get a little further down the road and cost estimates come in less, great. If we can repurpose, great. But we need to be prepared financially to make sure that we can take on the entire elephant, and it's a big one. And so that's what we're going to prepare for, and I feel really good about where we are right now. So happy to take your questions here shortly on that. Last few things. We got a couple questions, some misperceptions about shelters, cold weather shelters. Those run through those types of decisions. We obviously, Chief Craner and our team do a great job working with Travis at emergency management, emergency operations. Those types, I think there's some misperception in the community out there that the city makes decisions on opening emergency shelters. I believe, and I'm not exact on this number, we weren't even 100% sure that we actually opened on our own any shelters during Ivan. I think it's all, so it's been at least 20 years, and maybe longer. We couldn't confirm that. But there's a lot that goes into opening shelters, and this came up because of the cold weather. And of course, we trust, anytime there's an emergency, we trust the experts, and we are one cog in that wheel. So certainly if we're leaned on about opening emergency shelters, that we will absolutely do that. But there's a lot that goes into it, what building you're allowed to use, having trained shelter staff in place. There's a lot of complexity. And imagine if we were in a hurricane and we decided that we didn't like where the shelters were going to be, and then I asked our fire department to open shelters. That doesn't get us anywhere. So I just want to clear up some confusion. A couple emails I get or questions I get about why doesn't the city open shelters? Well, it's a much more complex situation than that. And again, specific questions about those decisions, all that, I would certainly defer to emergency management, and that's where when there is an emergency to deal with, that's where we get our information from. But I will say, I'm glad we have our community response specialists out there. I know there were reports of some of our uniformed officers doing the best we can with some of the folks that were on the street, trying to get them in some in particular places. So I know our team was out there working on it. Not only our community response folks, but also our uniformed folks doing what we could to help some of the folks that were out on the street. And again, we'll always, when it comes to making decisions about emergency shelters, be conferring with our emergency operations. Let's see, another neighborhood cleanup, January 27th is our next one, Saturday, and it's kind of in the downtown area in portions of the surrounding neighborhoods. I always remind folks sometimes, we'll say, well, someone across the street got this or a block away. Just make sure you look at the maps. They're on our City of Pensacola website to make sure that whether you're in that designated zone, but it's the downtown area on January 27th. We continue to see some positive evolution on the Park Mobile app. We're up to 8,117 app transactions, and we're month to date, we're at 6657 on Park Pensacola. So remember, last time I gave you those numbers, we were kind of 50-50. We're starting to see this continue to evolve to now, or migrate really to the app that we are going to be using for the foreseeable future. So that's good news. We at this time, our plan is to continue to have Park Pensacola, the old app, up until March 1st. At this point, obviously, if we need to make a call and if we get closer, but we like how it's trending right now. That we're beyond 50-50, and that we have more citizens and visitors using the correct app. So we think with a whole nother month, we feel pretty good about where that'll be. I've got a couple questions about the public safety, the right-of-way ordinance. It goes into effect 5 days after, like all ordinances do, which will be Thursday, January 25th. I know obviously our PPD and officers are aware of this and will be out enforcing it. We are going to do, as other communities have done with similar ordinances, we're going to do a grace period to just make sure that folks who don't understand the rule, we're not trying to play gotcha with anybody, that we were going to do a 30-day grace period. So we might be writing warnings or be giving warnings out for those 30 days for folks that may not have heard the news or something like that. So we certainly want to make sure that everybody is aware of the rules, and we'll continue to monitor that. And after the 30 days, we'll be able to do some enforcement. We've got the first coat of acrylic down at Roger Scott Tennis Center. We were hoping January, but because of putting acrylic down, there's a lot. You need perfect weather. You need it can't be cold, can't be rainy. It can't be rainy for a certain amount of time. So I know we've gotten a layer down. I think there's 4 to go. So that's simply we're waiting on the windows of which to be able to put that down. It's looking great, but we are still shooting for sometime in February to have the tennis center open. And I think I've got some small updates on the pool bathrooms continue to progress. They will not be done by pool season at Roger Scott, but they'll be underway. And then Veterans Memorial Park design's underway as well. So last thing you might notice, downtown Pensacola, there's going to be a new information kiosk in partnership with Visit Pensacola. It'll be right on the southwest corner of Plaza Ferdinand, right across from Jackson's there at Zaragoza. And so that's a kiosk that Visit Pensacola is going to be using. And kind of funny how it's come to fruition. This was something that I discussed initially as the board chair of Visit Pensacola a few years ago, that it would be great to have a little more tourism kind of presence, resources for people walking around downtown. The Visit Pensacola office is over there next to the bridge. That's not the same kind of resource that it would be to have some kind of presence to be able to help visitors navigate their way around. So Visit covered the cost of the installation, and they've hooked into our power. That's kind of the partnership. We'll cover the power cost. But you'll see that kiosk going up. I think the installation's Monday, January 29th. So that'll be a great thing for our residents, for our visitors, to be able to have that resource if they're looking for a restaurant or a museum, anything like that. It's just one more way to make sure that we're getting all of our visitors the correct information. So with that, that's all I've got, and I'll take your questions.
Mayor, on the Gibson School, I know you said you don't really have a plan for what that'll be. I mean, is there anything of like what you're thinking it may be?
There's lots of options. Obviously, goal number one is to conserve the building, right? And so, again, if this were to continue to progress as we hope, we would within the, I'll put it this way, within the request of the CRA, the appraised value plus closing costs, plus there'll be a structural assessment value in there. Not the full one that you've heard, not the 6-figure one that we've been talking about, but probably something lesser than that, just to get an idea to make sure that the building still has the ability, we don't want anyone, whether it be the city or someone outside the city, to spend significant dollars trying to fix up a building that's not structurally sound. So we want to make sure that any dollars invested into the rehab of that building are worthwhile. So that would be the first step. From there, it's a large piece of property. It's a city block ultimately, and so I would love to if there's a way. Obviously, we're going to always look at opportunities if there's housing, if there's attainable housing type things that could happen concurrently with the existing building on the property. great. I think there's a lot of creative people out there that can come up with some ideas. But what the uses would be for, who would use the building, who would pay for the repairs, just too early to speculate on that right now, because we just have to know more information. But goal number one is to save this historic structure. That's number one. And then number two is, within that world, within that spectrum, what's the best way to help put all of that together? Nothing is off the table, I would say, in terms of that, other than not demolishing the building or replacing that with housing, something like that. Certainly that would not be why we would be interested in purchasing it.
How does that, as far as purchasing the building, kind of align with previous statements about the city taking on things with maintenance and can't handle that type of thing? Is this another thing the city's taking on?
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'd say is, I don't think our intent would be, the city's intent would not be to continue long-term necessarily to own and maintain the building. I believe the city's role in this case is to not allow the ability for a historic structure to not even be considered to be saved. So our investment in this is not that we want to own and maintain it forever, or that we have to. There's a lot of, again, there's scenarios where, I could see a scenario where a user of the building, a tenant of the building, is responsible for the repairs, and that we lease it to them for a low amount or a no amount based on what the expense was, and then we all win, right? We conserve the building, it goes into active use, the city isn't paying for those repairs, and they're not responsible for the maintenance. So, as an example, so we're not married to that idea, but I guess to your question, I could tell you, my interest is not in necessarily the city owning it and then having to maintain it in perpetuity. It would be to do what we can, or whatever subsidy it requires, to save the structure. And then what we hope is that there be some partnership out there, whether it be housing, whether in the building, whether it be an office, whether, we would look at all those options. And what we would hope is that we do our job, and then we're able to hand off that responsibility to someone else. Now, again, there's a very real scenario that we get a structural assessment back, and what if it says that it's not structurally sound at all? Well, then that's another discussion of whether we pursue this at all, right? Because if there's no ability to save the structure, then I don't want to, again, run the citizen or the taxpayer into a situation that's unsolvable. That I don't think that would be our role. Our role is to make darn sure that a building that has a rich history here in our community, in the Black community here, that we give it a fair shake, to make sure that it's something that can be conserved. No promises that it can or can't, but at least I'd sleep better at night knowing that we gave it its best shot. And if it can't happen, it can't happen. So again, too early to say, but my intent, my intent long term would not be to own and maintain, the building in perpetuity, 100% on the dime of the city. Yeah.
Hey, are you going to go back to the Children's Trust or other places to acquire Lakeview Center?
We're still mulling that over. I mean, I've had an initial conversation with Commissioner May about it. I think we still both are interested in, in acquiring it. And when I say interested, I mean collectively, whether that be the county, whether that be the city, whether that be some kind of partnership. So I wouldn't say that an acquisition is off the table. But I would say I don't think. Based on the AG opinion, I don't think we're going back to the trust for that, unless there would be some kind of programming that we would put in, after we would acquire it. I could tell you, and I mentioned during the Malcolm Young conversation, if we were going to spend $3 million on a 62-year-old building to only give it 15 more years of life, it makes a lot more sense to spend $3 million on a building that, I don't remember exactly, 10, 15 years old, that's already built in place. So I use it in that comparison, in that sense, that if it was the will of the council, the will of the CRA or others to say, hey, well, we can't save this building, but we want another building, that seems to make a lot of financial sense more than starting from scratch. I can tell you, I don't know what the number would be for a new gym, but it's more than $3 million, I can guarantee you. So, yes, it's still on our radar, I guess, John, to answer your question, but not in that form, not in the Children's Trust form. It would be more of a conventional, city or county, and if the county wanted to take it on, and that makes sense, it's right there at the city-county line. I know Commissioner May and the county had some interest in the Inglewood, property at one point, and they were looking for facilities. I know there's some money talked about around the jail, that there was going to be some investment there, that there's some dollars earmarked for that. So it may make more sense for the county to take it on, which I still think is a great thing, because obviously, even though it's a county facility, city residents would be able to use it, and if it was a city facility, county residents would be able to use it. So, so we're still I guess it's my way of saying that I think we are still interested in it. In what form and who's going to own it, all that, too early. We're going to kind of, assess and go from there.
I have a follow-on from the
Yeah.
Malcolm Young
Sure.
discussion. The subject of exclusive or semi-exclusive leases of park property. Are you looking at all these leases now? I mean, that one was held up with Lighthouse as an example of something you didn't support that makes sense to the mayor. But there's many others out there.
Yeah.
And you know who they are. I mean, it's Bill Bond, it's Southern Youth Sports. I mean, are you looking at all those to see if you can make better arrangements?
Look, I mean, every lease is different. Let's address the Malcolm Young lease. For example, it says something to the effect of, well, it's non-exclusive. The city can use it with permission. Well, if that was truly the case, I don't think we could have called Lighthouse and used it for 9 hours a day, 4 days a week. And of course not, because then you'd say, well, why do we have a lease at all? So sometimes it's nice to put language in a lease, but in practice, it doesn't really mean anything. I'm not. Malcolm Young was predicated on the condition of the building. It wasn't predicated on, I don't like how this lease was written, so we're just not going to do it. I don't like how the lease was written, and again, I don't like taking things that we're investing in and then them not have, be in the public realm. But the brunt of the issue at Malcolm Young was clearly safety of children using the building. That was how we got here. And so I guess to your question, am I interested in doing leases at community facilities that basketball gymnasiums, community centers, things like that, and entering into partnerships where the city doesn't have access to them anymore moving forward? Not necessarily. That's not something I'm interested in. But I don't know. There's a lot of leases that are already out there. I mean, you mentioned Vickery Center. It's that's a long-term lease with the YMCA that was part of a land deal and other things that were before me. That doesn't necessarily mean I can walk in and say, well, because I don't prefer these types of things, we aren't going to do it anymore. So I just want to be clear: we aren't going out and targeting different community partnerships and leases, and I don't want to really vilify SYSA or YMCA or Lighthouse. I mean, in the fact that that's great. Certainly, why are those leases signed? I believe they're doing good things for the youth in our community. So sometimes that gets forgotten. It's that the YMCA, the kids using, even though they're using it through the YMCA and not using it through our Parks and Rec department, doesn't mean that they aren't doing something positive or doing something good. It's just when we have the maintenance issues that we have, and when we have all of that, and it becomes our financial obligation, the fact that city residents don't have access to it is kind of where that would be my concern.
Have you renegotiated the terms of the Vickery Center swimming pool hours and access lease over there?
No,
there's something new, I've been told. Yeah,
so what we're doing is we had a meeting with them. It's been several months. It was the end of a 3-year agreement with YMCA, and so it's time to relook at that. Given the timing right now, and that there's a lot to do when you go rebid that out. I believe our intent now is we're trying to work with the Y on a 1-year kind of a let's get through this pool season. But there was one stipulation in the lease I wasn't a big fan of, which was kind of it was based on the expense side, where there was really no controls in place on the expense side. Not to say YMCA was doing anything wrong. I just like to have an understanding. You budget things, you like to have an understanding of what those costs are. So we've asked them to kind of modify that even in the 1 year, and certainly that'll be something we'll want to look at with a long-term lease, be it the YMCA or anyone else. But it's no indictment of how the YMCA's operated the pool or anything like that. We just, but it's time to look at at that holistically about, who's operating them and what those terms are. So we've been in continuous conversation, probably some I'm not fully briefed on yet as well, that, between Ben and Parks and Rec, Tanya and them. So, but I know those conversations continue and they're productive, and, I think we're getting on the same page with them.
Mayor,
Yeah.
Now that the Malcolm Young gym is pretty much settled, at least,
Yeah.
what do we know about the latest work on the Cobb Center?
Yeah, so Cobb Center, next step, we certainly appreciate the support from CRA to do the larger scale assessment and do what should have been done probably a few or several years ago at Malcolm Young, and let's catch this before it gets too far away from us. And so I appreciate their support on that. So that assessment, I don't have a timetable yet, we can get it to you, but next step is to get that full assessment so we have a clean, clear understanding of what it's going to take to put that gym back to where it needs to be. And why those two things, while Malcolm and Cobb continue to be conversations hand in hand, is that we can all assume safely assume there's a finite amount of dollars that can be spent on. We don't have an infinite repair budget or maintenance budget. That when you're making decisions about which one, it seems to be, I believe, the much more prudent decision to let's save the active building that's in use, that's in the public realm right now, and make sure that doesn't get to the place that Malcolm Young got. So we're going to jump on it as soon as we can. And David mentioned to the council that it's probably a 4 to 6 month time frame in terms of getting that assessment done. And then, of course, from there, we'll be ready to go with whatever they prescribe. And, fingers crossed it's not a big number. And if it's not, certainly we're going to jump right on it. And if it is, we'll have a conversation with council and CRA, well, not CRA, but just council on what to do next and how do we figure out how to fund it. But I am very motivated and intentional about let's get that assessment done as quickly as possible. Let's not let this one take the same fate that Malcolm Young had because we didn't pay attention. So very, very motivated to make sure that stays in the public realm.
Mayor, it's my understanding Inspire Placemaking is going to be in town.
Yes.
They're doing workshops on the land redevelopment code with stakeholders. I haven't seen any public notices or press releases about that's happening. I guess.
Yeah, so we can get you a timeline of all that, and there's public engagement opportunity. Remember, the first thing that's happening right now is an LDC assessment. That's what right when I started, I mentioned when I was campaigning about, we hadn't had a comprehensive look at our land development code in 16 years, and I say in Pensacola years, that's like 50. We had one restaurant downtown 16 years ago. So, it's time to look at that. And what was really reassuring when I went to U.S. Conference of Mayors last week in D.C., that it probably came up 3 times in a public-private partnership workshop, in a housing workshop, in a veterans workshop about how to bring resources. Independent, the conversations came up about, hey, mayors, you really need to be looking at your land development code and how we thicken these neighborhoods. And so I'm glad that we're ahead of that. And so the assessment will take place, which will allow an outside, Inspire in this case, to compile as much information as they can and then say, hey, this makes a lot of sense, this doesn't make a lot of sense. There's a whole nother conversation, much larger, about implementation. So that will be probably twice the cost. Certainly will take months and months of time, and there'll be community engagement in that. And I don't even want to say that there isn't any community engagement in the LDC assessment. Let me get you the running schedule of events. They've been real good about communicating those dates and times, and we'll make sure that we get those to you. So, David, I don't know if is there a public engagement within the assessment?
Currently on the back end.
Yeah, okay. So I think within the timeline of before a final assessment is even done, there is going to be community engagement. But again, when they're done, that doesn't mean we just run to council and say, change these 20 things or 10 things. Then we start a whole nother process of implementation. What does the city want? What does make sense? And that's where a lot of the community engagement will certainly ramp up.
I guess the question, like you said, the land development code is probably the most powerful policy document the city has, and when you're asking for feedback from stakeholders, but there's no public notice that say, hey, that's happening or anything, I guess it does kind of raise a question about transparency in that process.
Well, sure, and look, you have to understand, and this is with every topic, is that just because before I make a decision on something, we confer with the community, we ask surveys, but through surveys what's important to you and all that. But we also, there's technical experts too. It's not. We always want community feedback, and I think we've shown a good track record of that. But stakeholders, those are architects, those are construction, that's zoning, planning experts within our city, where you're really getting in the weeds on technical aspects of the land development code. This isn't just a scenario where they're going to say, well, this policy sounds good, what do you think? There's a lot to get in the weeds about that's well above my head as not a planner and zoning. So this is not a either or conversation. This is these are things that we can do both, and we are going to do both. So an assessment of the LDC, we've hired the outside expert to come in and say, we do this in communities all over the country. Here's what we like about your code. Here's what we don't like about your code. They want to be sure in some of those recommendations, so they need to ask a lot of technical questions. So the assessment is more technical than what the implementation would be. That is not a territorial, we don't want to hear from the community. And in fact, it's part of the timeline for them to hear from the community. So as I said, I'll let you look at that. Certainly look at that. Since they've started, have had a spelled out timeline of how all this is going to work, and they'll be here for those 5 days. As well, and so Cynthia in planning, as well as the documents that are already there, we'll get that to you, and you can take a look. Yeah.
Mayor, circling back to the Baptist funding plan, what's the thought process behind the proceeds of the Paces sale coming to the city instead of going to the landowner, Baptist, and then Baptist's contribution being
the $3 million?
They're being moved by that amount of that sale. Why would it come straight to the city instead of back to the landowner?
Sure. Good question, but an easy one to answer, because the fact of the matter is, and I believe Baptist had notified Paces at one point that we would want them, that we were going to proceed and cancel those contracts because the donation, all 50 acres of the donation of the property is going to the city in order for this to happen, right? So when they take, I believe it's 12, 14 acres of that at 2.9 million, that's less to the city and more to Baptist. So my counter argument to that would be, what would the difference then be to cancel the contract, take donation of the property, city takes donation, then we sell it to Paces for 2.9 million. In other words, to me, it's 6 here, half a dozen there, to count that as a full $3 million contribution from Baptist, when in fact the entire donation of the campus is what's being discussed. So, understand, any master developer that's going to come in, that's 14 less acres they're working with as well, and that makes it that much more difficult to be able to have something happen at scale, all of those things. The reason we continued with it, and we've had great conversations with Paces, is that they are very committed to. My biggest concern was we didn't want to have apples and oranges on the same site. We didn't want them to do something and it doesn't fit the community. They're not under the same regulations, not under the same community benefits agreement. And so that was my initial concern. But they've helped quell those concerns. They are more than open to doing that. They actually shared with us one of the community benefits agreements they've already signed for a project in North Carolina. So I feel very comfortable moving forward that they want to be a cohesive part of whatever happens on campus, that they're not going to just take their ball and do their own thing, which, as you can imagine, off the cuff would be an initial concern when it's going to be such a big part of that campus. So in my mind, what I'm saying is we're taking this on for the greater good of being able to create housing. So as it comes down to the logistics of the transaction, if we were to just wait, take the donation of all 50 acres, then turn around and sell it to Paces, we thought it made a lot more prudent sense for Baptist, who already has a contract with Paces, to then just forward that money over, which would really be the same tactic in a different way.
Baptist must have some large tax considerations in this whole transaction. Is tax issues part of the calculus?
I can't speak to what their tax issues are or are not. I know there's been some conversations that one of the potential hurdles of reuse of the main campus is how it was bonded or funded. And again, that's above me. I don't, you'll have to ask Baptist about But I do know that has been mentioned to me by Baptists as some of the potential complication of reuse of some of the buildings is how they were funded initially. That perhaps it has to be used for healthcare or something like that. I don't even want to speak out of turn on that, but yeah. So their tax implications, I'm not exactly sure of. But the mechanism of keeping the idea of PACES is if this goes well, if they're able to get those tax credits. They already have a contract with Baptist. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on that. They can move forward, and I'd be willing to bet just about anything that those would be the first 200 units in the air, without a doubt, if that project goes through. So that's a good thing too. At the end of the day, we're here to build housing, and so if we can get 200 units up sooner than what a master plan development would take, there's some value in that as well.
So if all this funding stack comes together within a year, as you say, and the donation goes through, does the city now, who owns James Lima's master plan? Is that part of the donation?
I mean, I don't know technically, but I can comfortably say that if that's that Baptist would convey that. I mean, in other words, they've been very open and certainly friendly on that.
The master developer.
At that point, I don't have any intent. I'll tell you right now. I think if we snapped our fingers and we had the funding, and next step would be to finalize the donation request we started working on, and there's still some things to work through, environmental and some other things like that. Then the next step, if not before that's even signed, we may move ahead with probably an owner's rep that would represent the city in the demolition, abatement, and site prep. That's really phase one, right? I mean, it's not where are you going to put what building? We've got to get the buildings down and all that. So we would probably hire an owner's. This is just off the cuff. What I think will happen could change, but we would hire an owner's rep, and then of course we get hot and heavy into pricing out RFP, demo, and abatement. And getting that up and going, because with any state funds, there's a timeline on those. And there's actually about a 3-year timeline on the HUD CDBG money as well. So we don't have forever to sit around and mull a lot of things over.
When did the clock start on that block grant?
It hasn't yet. Fortunately for us, I mean, it's not because we've asked. Just how the world has turned, it hasn't started. It won't until we've executed it, council's approved it, and then. So you've seen a few of these come through recently, the port grant and others. What happens is once they approve receiving those funds, I sign it. It goes to Florida Commerce, and then once Florida Commerce signs it, the clock starts. So, for example, Hollis T. Williams, probably any day now, will, so we've already approved it, we've signed it, any day now, they'll start it. But we're also not rushing, we got a lot to do on those projects. So, same with Baptist, we're not calling them every morning asking to start the clock. We've got a lot to do. So, but that's just how it's played out to this point. Yeah, actually, I think we just got an update this week. The owner's back in town, and we were notified that everyone, all the tenants were out, according to them. I don't know that that's something we've confirmed, but so we should be out on the home stretch to be able to close on the building. So last time I think I updated you guys, we had said kind of through the holidays that the owner was gone for several weeks. Yeah. And then, we just talked about making sure that it's secured, once we close on it. So we already have, and we've been working with PPD, Public Works, and many others. I joked, I think with y'all a few months ago that our Motor Lodge meetings have about 8 different departments in them, one way or another, housing, CRA, Public Works, PPD. So our intent is once we close, we'll get it secured with fencing and whatever the things that we got to do. So we're already in preparation of that, but it hasn't officially closed yet. But we are definitely on the home stretch. So.
And then there's a Senate bill that Senate Bill 1122 that would basically could restore the placement of removed monuments like the one in Florida Square. Have y'all been monitoring this at all? Have you?
I think I may have seen something in the news this morning about it. I'll take it's really the same position I've had since, these are lawsuits that have preceded me. I'm not really, briefed and up to date on on exactly what's going on with those. I think the city will continue to do what we're already doing, and we'll take information or the passing of things like that as it comes. That was council action from a previous council, and so I haven't really gotten involved in any of that.
Mayor, follow up with that. Where is the monument now, and whatever became of the discussions with the community about relocating, for instance, to St. John's Cemetery? Are you up to? I mean,
yeah, I don't think since my administration, I don't recall any conversations we've had or any community conversations about relocation. That might have been under Mayor Robinson. I don't think we've had any of that. The last I've been told, I haven't gone looking for it or anything. The last I've been told is it was at the port somewhere. But to be honest with you, I haven't even asked. I've got too many American Magics and Baptist hospitals to deal with, other than chasing down statues. So, but as I said, we'll continue to. It's been with legal for quite a while now, and we'll just continue to proceed and like anything that comes from Tallahassee. Obviously, if it affects us, we'll digest it and adjust. And whether it's red light cameras, this or something else. So we'll see how that goes.
Mayor, there was a man concerned about the health of Bayou Chico. He reports that items including car parts and things floating up.
Yep.
And they said the Escambia commissioner said this morning that it was a city code enforcement issue. Do you have that complaints?
No, look, I'll have to dig into that. Bayou Chico, I know a lot of the efforts for cleanup of Bayou Chico has actually really been with the county that has spearheaded that. That doesn't mean, I wouldn't be able to comment on, I'd have to know exactly what the code, what the complaint is. I mean, if it was something on the north side on land, that city property, perhaps, if that's what the presumption is that it's coming from, someone on city-owned property. But I'm not. I'd hate to speak to that because I'm not aware of that issue.
That recycling place, the car recycling.
Oh, gotcha.
And
okay.
The things are falling off, and bumpers and parts are floating.
I see.
And that's why.
Well, certainly, if it is, I guess what I could say is, if it is within city code, then certainly we'll look into it and we'll act appropriately in that sense. But I haven't been made aware of that. Doesn't mean it isn't happening, but we'll take a look into that and follow back up with you.
Hold on, I have one more.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Last month there was a Baldwin County deputy arrested for grand theft auto of the
UTV Gator at the Jefferson parking garage. There was a Gator sitting there with a key in there. He decided to get on it, crank it up, and take it for a joyride all around downtown Pensacola.
All right.
So he's a Baldwin County deputy.
Okay.
But our question is why was there a key? Is that just like a fluke in the system kind of thing?
Yeah, same thing. I'm not trying to be evasive. I don't know. This is the first I've heard of the joyride. So again, doesn't mean it hadn't happened. And I'm just gonna surmise that I'm sure logic has prevailed that if that is the case, what you're telling me, I imagine we have a new policy about the key. But I can't speak exactly to that because I'm not aware of that.
Is that like a DIB?
See, even that I don't know. I don't know if this was a city thing, a DIB thing, or remember we also we have cleaning crew. There's third party vendors that service downtown. So I'm not sure exactly who owned that thing, but I'll make sure we're on the city side. We'll make sure our keys are on person, not in the vehicle. So, all right. Thanks, guys.